So we are going to write equations in our favorite slope-intercept form. Okay, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. We talked about it yesterday. It's called slope-intercept form because it gives you a and a. Okay, so let's start with write an equation in slope-intercept form that passes through the points for 1 and 2 negative, what in the world, 2 negative 3. There we go. Now, if I wanted to do this the same way that I did the homework last night, I could go to a graph. I could plot those 2 points. I could draw the line and see what the slope is and see where it hits the y-axis and come up with my equation that way, couldn't I? I could do that. Most people don't want to go to a graph if they don't have to. They'll do hours of math work if they don't have to go to the graph. So I'm going to show you how to do it without having to go through the graph. What are the 2 things that I need to write an equation in y equals mx plus b form? I need m and I need b. Right? Just like from yesterday, I need m and I need b. Once I have those 2 things, I can write my equation super quick. How can I find the slope if I have 2 points? I can do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? That's going to give me what? That's going to give me my slope. So, in this problem, I would put negative 3 minus 1 over 2 minus 4. What's negative 3 minus 1? Negative 4. And 2 minus 4? And negative 4 over negative 2 is positive 2. What did I just find? Slope. Can I write my equation yet? No. So that was step 1. Step 2 is going to get me my b value. Step 2, I am going to choose one. We're not going to do all this writing for all the examples, I promise. Choose one of the 2 given points. Just one of them. Plug it into y equals mx plus b with the slope you just, I can't spell and talk at the same time, J-U-S-T, got. So what does that mean? Well, if I think back to my equation, y equals mx plus b, I now know what m is, don't I? So I can go where the m is, and I can replace that with a 2, because I know what m is. Then the second step says choose one of the 2 given points. It doesn't matter which point I use. As long as whichever point I use both the x and the y from that point. So my suggestion would be pick the point that has either smaller numbers or easier numbers, positive numbers. I'm going to choose the 4 and the negative 1, the 4 and the 1, just because they're both positive. And I think that makes it a little easier. Within this point, I have an x and I have a y. So what do you think I'm going to use instead of y? If I'm picking this point? 1. What do you think I'm going to use instead of x?
4.
So what did I do? I just translated y equals mx plus b with the y value, the m value I got in the last step, and the x value from that same point. Why is that helpful? Well, let's see what happens here. 1 equals 8 plus b. How do I solve for b? Subtract 8. So negative 7 equals my b value. So if I had my slope and now have my b value, what's my final equation? Y equals 2x minus 7. I do not put the x and the y from that point in again at the end. I was just using it in that case to find b. Now, what if I picked the other point instead? What would happen? I would get the exact same b value. Don't believe me? Try it on your own. Okay? But you would get the exact same b value. So it doesn't matter which point you use. Yes?
So for the 2x part, it doesn't matter what number we choose. So instead of 1 as y, we put 4.
No, because since this is an ordered pair, it's always x comma y. So I can only plug in the 4 as an x and a 1 as a y. Or if I picked this point, I would have to plug in 2 as x and negative 3 as y. Okay? All right, let's try another one. I'm not going to write all that stuff out again. I'm just going to give you the 2 points. Okay? But the same question. So negative 2, 4, and 2, 0. I need to write the equation. So again, what are the 2 things I need to find? I need to find m and b. How do I find m? y2 minus y1. 0 minus 4 over what? 2 minus negative 2. Remember, the first 2 values on top and bottom need to be from the same point. So 0 minus 4 is negative 4. What's 2 minus a negative 2? What happens to minus a negative? That becomes a plus. And what's negative 4 over 4? So my slope is negative 1. How do I find the b value? Plug one of the points in. Which point should I plug in? It doesn't matter, but anytime there's a 0, I usually think it's easier. So, again, if I have y equals mx plus b, what am I plugging in for y? 0. M is negative 1, x is 2, and b is what I don't know. So 0 equals, what's negative 1 times 2? Plus b. What am I going to do now? Add 2. So I get b equals 2. Now that I know what m and b is, m and b are, what's my equation? Y equals negative 1x, which we could write as just negative x, plus 2. So? Okay. I'm going to give you an example, and I want you to see how far you can get through it before you get stuck. Okay? So, 3, negative 1, and 1, negative 3. See how far you can get on this one. Again, you need m, and you need b. All right, were you able to finish it? Okay. How do I find my slope? y2 minus y1. So what's that going to look like? Negative 3 minus negative 1. And on the bottom, what am I going to have? 1 minus 3. Well, I know 1 minus 3 is negative 2. What happens up here? That becomes a plus, right? What's negative 3 plus 1?
Negative 2.
And negative 2 over negative 2 is? So my slope is positive 1. Raise your hand if you got that. Good. All right. So now I use y equals mx plus b. And both points to me seem about equally difficult, right? Both of them have one positive, one negative. Nothing has a 0. So I'm just going to pick the first one. What would I plug in for y if I use the first point? Negative 1. Now, if you use the other point, just bear with me because you should end up with the same thing. Okay? What do I plug in for m?
1.
What do I plug in for x? Plus b. So negative 1 equals, what's 1 times 3? And then what do I do to find b? Okay, negative 1 minus 3 is? Equals b. So what is my final equation? Y equals 1x, which we would just write x, minus 4. Terribly difficult? Okay. Number 4. I think we'll do 2 more, 4 and 5. 2, negative 2, and 4, 5. And then I'm going to go ahead and give you the other one, 0, 3, and 2, negative 3. Go ahead and try those two on your own. Number 4 has an ugly slope, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So as far as plugging things in, that's going to be kind of ugly, right? Now let me think about this for a minute. I think it'll end up being okay because the denominator is a 2. And what is it that I multiply the slope by? I multiply it by x, right? So as long as I multiply it by something that divides by 2 nicely, then I'm good to go. And both of these points divide by 2 nicely, so it'll end up getting rid of that fraction. So follow along. If I use the first point and I plug in negative 2 for y, 7 over 2 for m, 2 for x, and then I use plus b, I get negative 2 equals, how do I multiply two fractions? Don't I put this over 1, and I have 7 times 2, which is 14, and 2 times 1, which is 2. What's 14 over 2? So I get negative 2 equals 7 plus b. So it turns out okay. If I subtract 7, what's my b value? Negative 9. So what's my final answer? Y equals 7 halves x minus 9. Now, be careful how you write things. Because if you write this right here as 7 over 2x, it's wrong. Sorry, you can't see that. If you write this like this, it's wrong. Why? This is technically x over 1. This isn't x over 1. This is an x on the bottom. So you do need to bump that x out to the side because it does change the meaning of what you're trying to express. Okay? All right, and the last one, number 5. I need slope and y-intercept. So let's see, negative 3 minus 3 over 2 minus 0. So negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. So my slope is negative 3. Not too bad. I'm going to use the first point. I'm going to plug in 3 for y equals my slope times my x value plus b. Well, what is negative 3 times 0? So what does b equal? So if I know b equals 3, what's my equation? Y equals negative 3x plus 3. Any questions? All right, your homework is posted on Google Classroom. Happy studying.